Pellegrino, thank you for that introduction. I am thrilled by the fact that we have a website in the UK where you can actually put in a speed that they'll tell you you've got the land speed record. One thing I will have to correct you on, though, I actually hold the world record speeding fine. Because land speed records are set on large, dry lake beds where nothing else happens. So they're public land because there is no commercial use for them. And the previous record, which I'll talk more in a moment, we actually set back in 1997 at a speed of 1,228 kilometers an hour, 763 miles an hour. A little bit faster than the speed of sound. The first and still only supersonic land speed record on US government land, which has a nominal 55 mile per hour speed limit. So I am 713 miles an hour over the speed limit. Multiply that by several dollars per mile an hour, I have the largest excess speeding fine in history to date. Good news is we're planning to get an even bigger one. With the Project Bloodhound, an attempt, as you've heard, to do 1,600 kilometers an hour. And to tell the story at the same time, because this is an amazing sport. The land speed record is an incredibly simple form of motorsport. It is the oldest form of motorsport. Astonishingly, started in 1898 by the French. A Frenchman called Gaston de Chasseloup-Laubat set a blistering speed in 1898 of 63 kilometers an hour. Slightly slower, it has to be said, than the cycling record of the time, but it was a start. And if you are French, but have we got any French in the audience? Anybody of French extraction? Welcome. Do enjoy this moment. This is your last mention. Because it turns out that the Brits are really good at this. It's been said that the British are really good at sitting down sports, like rowing and cycling. This is a sitting down sport, and we are better at it than anybody else in the world. In the 1920s, the Brits took this over, and we've held the record for longer than everybody else since then. And we still hold the record today with this car, the thrust supersonic car. Coming up for 20 years ago, this was the car that was the first and still only car to exceed a record at the speed of sound. And what I want to do is talk about a little bit about the engineering and technology that allowed us to do that, what we learned from that, and how we are going to use that to do something even more remarkable next time. First of all, there are a handful of big challenges in terms of where you run it and the actual structure of the vehicle and the wheels, and I'll come on to some of that later. But the biggest single challenge is to keep the car on the ground. To give you some idea, the car, it was actually deliberately built very wide to make it very stable. This was a car that was never going to roll over. So the twin-engine configuration with the very wide wheels is to actually keep it very firmly on the ground. 4 meters wide, it was 17 meters long. It would fill this whole stage for about 1/10 of a second before its 10-ton weight collapsed the stage. The disadvantage with a 4-meter wide car is it's very sensitive to the aerodynamic angle it's running at. Running along the ground at supersonic speeds, if it is running 1 degree too much nose down, you generate 10 tons of extra download on the front of the car, and you crush the front of the car into the desert. From my point of view as the driver, that is not a good thing. If you're running along the desert, 1 degree too much nose up, you will generate 10 tons of lift at the front of the car. The front wheels will leave the ground. The car will finish up at 90 degrees, slowing down at 40 times the force of gravity as the air pressure rips the bodywork off, the engines come out through the bottom of the car, and the chassis collapses. And at that point, I will lose all further interest in the afternoon's proceedings. So that angle running along the ground is absolutely critical. So the single biggest question we had to solve at supersonic speed at ground level, which no one had ever done before, what is that angle? How do we keep the car on the ground? Traditionally, the solution to that is to put it in a wind tunnel. Wind tunnel, you can build a supersonic wind tunnel. It's very expensive, but it does work. Unfortunately, it's not the flow over the top of the car we're trying to simulate. It's the flow underneath the car that is unknown. And you don't just need a tunnel with supersonic air, you need a supersonic rolling road underneath it. Now, if anybody here thinks that they can build a supersonic conveyor belt, Do come and see me afterwards. I'd love to hear it. But that wasn't going to work. We can't build that supersonic flow. Now, this is the 1990s when we're looking at this. A new technology is just starting to be used, computational fluid dynamics. Nowadays, we take it for granted. This was 30 years ago. This was a brand new technology that people didn't, or 25 years ago. It was being done on supercomputers, the size of this stage, with 25 years ago, the sort of computing power that your phone now has. You know, it was a pretty basic form of computing, and it was unproven. This is a great design tool. You can measure all the pressures, not just add them all up to work out what that critical angle is. You can even look at the load on each particular bit to work out, in engineering terms, what structural stresses it's going to take, if the computer model is even slightly accurate. And 25 years ago, we were using a supercomputer made by Cray. Some of you may remember the Cray series supercomputers, huge things. The same computer that the weather forecasters were using to predict the world's weather patterns. Now, anybody here think it's a good idea to trust the computer that does the world's weather forecasts? Yeah, we had the same problem. So here's the piece of innovation that had never been done before. Here's the piece of innovation that made everything else that follows possible. If you can't put a wind tunnel model in a wind tunnel because the ground doesn't move, then take a wind tunnel model into the outside world and fire it at supersonic speeds. Fill it full of pressure sensors and compare it with the computer model. And rather than describe that, I will show you what that looks like. It's about a 1 meter long model, just under 1 meter. It's on a 1.6 kilometer long track. It's packed full of high-speed pressure sensors. It is strapped to 18 50-millimeter booster rockets. We found a man in the MOD with a huge shed full that needed using up. Sometimes defense is really useful. Filled in the white bit of the track in the middle there, simulating our desert surface. Told the cameraman this was a bad place to stand. Look here, don't blink. 0 to 1,300 kilometers an hour in less than 1 second. Now, this has two huge advantages over wind tunnel testing. Number one, to quote our brilliant aerodynamicist who invented this technique, he said, number one, this is a lot more fun than wind tunnel testing. But more importantly, this is a real-world way of measuring the pressures on top and underneath the car against a surface that's going past at supersonic speeds. And we compared the two and found out that they matched the computer model. We had validated this as a design tool, which then allowed us to build the car full scale, knowing that we had the shape about there. There will always be real-world differences, but the car is also packed full of pressure sensors to measure the differences, and then allowed us to do something which has never been done before or since, which is to take the car supersonic. And if you look closely, you can see the shockwaves coming off that car. We don't even know how the photographer took this photograph and captured all of those shockwaves coming off the car, and neither does he. He will claim it was all special use of lenses, and he just got one photo that worked. That is the only picture of its kind ever taken. So the timekeepers there were just to tell us how fast. The answer, just over 1,200 kilometers an hour, we were clearly supersonic, which means that these guys are still, today, the world champions, which is great. Hurrah, you know, Britain's good at yet another. In fact, this is the sport we're better at than anybody. There is one sport that we're really good at. This is it. Which then begs the question, if we already hold the record, and we've held it for 25 years, there's an Australian team, there's an American team now attempting it, but they haven't got there yet, why are we planning to spend a lot of somebody else's time and money building something even faster? Because let's face it, this is a pointless device. You are never going to, buying an electric Tesla, yes. Buying a 1,600 kilometer an hour car, no. You are never going to take the kids to school at supersonic speeds. Nice though the thought would be to drop them out at 1,000 kilometers an hour and let them cope with the problem. This is a one-off, and it will finish up in a museum, and it will not directly ever be available as real-world technology. So why are we doing it? Well, it's not just because there's competition, but actually because we want to take the story of the technology and showcase it to a global audience, particularly the global audience who will build and live in that high technology, low carbon, energy efficient world of the future. They're all about this tool right now. And across the world, we are having trouble engaging that audience in sufficient numbers to feed the need for technology. The speaker after this is going to talk about smart cities. It is very difficult to convince a 10-year-old the most important thing in his life is to become a civil engineer or a bridge builder. Get them excited about science and technology and how that relates to their world, and they will see for themselves why civil engineering, bridge building, and IT, and road management, and environmental sciences are an essential part of their future. But the trick first is to get them excited. So we're taking this project to the limit of modern technology, which happens to be just over 1,600 kilometers an hour. Where I come from, it's just over 1,000 miles an hour. It happens to be a round number. That's not why we chose it. That's where the mechanical limit, we think, is. And we're turning it into some of the world's most exciting science lessons, in everything from the mathematics of the speeding up and slowing down and the aerodynamics, all the way through to the environmental sciences of why so few of these perfect dry lake beds form around the world, and why the weather is different in South Africa to America to Northern Europe. Why don't we have any of these tracks in Northern Europe? There are every single science you want, even the human physiology of what it's like to be in a car like that. Yes, they are going to wire me up with sensors just to find out what it's like for me driving this car. I voted against that, by the way, but I was overridden. We have to share the science. And it's not just turning this into formal lessons, it's also allowing the kids to do their own exploration, do their own science and technology experiments in school. And the schools are now leading this. To give you one example, we had a school 6 years ago actually create their own model rocket car world record. And they got in touch with Guinness World Records and they created their own rocket car just to get the kids excited. It was a school, the science teacher was having trouble teaching science. He started this project for them, and after several months of work, this is what they managed to achieve.
Well, yeah. No reason why that shouldn't go back.
Are we ready?
3, 2, 1.
Okay, any science lesson where the science teacher is jumping up and down with excitement is a fun science lesson to do. 130 kilometers an hour in the school playground. That, at the time, was the Guinness World Record for a model rocket car. That's 6 years ago. Just have a guess in your own mind what that record is now, 6 years later. It was 130. It's now gone up to, what do you reckon, for school kids in a school playground? Because I'm going to show you, it's set by this car last year. I'm about to show you a clip of video, and if you look very closely at the start of the video, have your number in mind, see how it compares. There is a clue at the start of this video as to the new world record. Okay, 835 kilometers an hour. There is another national final next month where they are aiming to try and get faster than the speed of sound, above 1,200 kilometers an hour. The first car, called Bloodhound, or inspired by Bloodhound, is being built by kids to go supersonic. I'm excited about that, before we even start running the big car. And the effect of the Bloodhound education program, not just across the UK, we've got literally tens of thousands of kids building their own model rocket cars with their own data sensors inside, so they're actually data monitoring and putting all that stuff online and comparing how they're doing with schools, not just across the UK, but in the US, South Africa, Brazil, Turkey. I couldn't find a school doing it in Norway yet, but we're working on that. It is genuinely going global and getting kids that jumping up and down excitement about science, that trigger to get them hooked into science and technology when they're this tall, because they will one day build that smart city, that future of tomorrow. And that is the point of this. And it's also, there is a strong business case, both internationally to showcase our collective science and technology capabilities to the rest of the world. And when I say our, Norway has a part to play, and I'll come back to that in a second. But also, for each individual company, there is coincidentally, it is very useful, not just to be able to reach out to the sort of kids you might want to employ in 5 to 10 years' time, when they start to think about, and what am I going to do as a career? They already know what your company does and how it does it because of the school's outreach programs. But also, they're the next generation of consumers, being very basic about it. these are the kids that will buy your stuff. And if you've already shown them that it is world-class through a land speed record project, it gets your brand up there in their minds. That's part of what makes all of this work. So that is what we're trying to achieve. It's about inspiring that next generation, exciting them with the science and technology. Question then is, how are we going to do it? Because 1,600 kilometers an hour is a massive task. First of all, we need to keep it on the ground. Here's the second piece of innovation. We know basically this computer modeling technique works. We proved that 25 years ago. The challenge now is the speed range is so enormous. We're trying to put the biggest percentage increase in history onto the land speed record, all supersonic, because we're starting from a supersonic record. The airflow supersonic is completely different to less than the speed of sound. 1,200 kilometers an hour. Below that, very different to what happens above that. So you need a shape that is stable in both places. That has never been done before. And we set ourselves the task, we thought it would take 3 years to find a shape that would stay on the ground at all speeds safely by itself. It actually took us nearly 6 years, and we had to develop some new modeling techniques. We actually had to get together with Rolls-Royce and use something called design of experiments. Now, I'm a mathematician, so I find the idea of finding key turning points in 6-dimensional space really interesting. You probably won't, so I'm going to spare you that bit, but just trust me on the fact we did some astonishing science using Rolls-Royce optimization techniques, but on a whole car scale. First time anybody's ever done this on a car like this. And we finished up with a shape that we now can confidently predict will stay on the ground and can get to 1,600 kilometers an hour. But you're going to need an enormous amount of power to do that. Again, Rolls-Royce come to the fore helping us with the world's best military jet engine, the Eurofighter Typhoon engine. That's not only the most powerful for its size, it is also the most reliable military engine in history. And from my military career, I have worked with that engine. I have seen its effect. It is the most reliable engine ever. I'm going to strap myself to that going really fast. I'm quite pleased about that. But the scale of what we're trying to achieve, in the thick air down here at ground level, no jet fighter in history has done 1,600 kilometers an hour. Up at 10 or 15,000 meters, dead easy, the air's really thin. Down here at ground level, they all stop at about 1,500. We are trying to go, for the first time in over 100 years, we're trying to go faster than any jet fighter. 1913 was the last time that cars went faster than aeroplanes. We're trying to go back to that era in terms of sheer speed on the ground. So here's the bit where we need some new technology. Norwegian hybrid rocket power, being done by Nammo, a couple of hours out of Oslo, and they are producing some hybrid rocket technology for the next generation of space rockets. It is efficient, it is very user-friendly in terms of the chemicals. There's no horrendous explosives involved. Solid rubber is the fuel. Concentrated hydrogen peroxide, it's concentrated hair bleach is the oxidizer. Technically quite complex to put together, but if you've got a rocket like that, it's actually very safe to use, easy to store. It requires very little in the way of maintenance, very few people to operate it. Those are all the things that the next generation of cheap space flight is looking for, which is why we are helping them to develop this technology. And we're helping them with some of the pumping technology. They are helping us with the chemistry. We've done a few test firings, and the test program for the next year is going to deliver our rocket to run the car next year. Just to give you a little clue of the world-class space research going on in Norway right now.
10, 9, 8.
Watch out for the bit where they blow the camera over, by the way.
5.
Engineering
4,
meets the media, engineering
3,
wins.
2, 1. Perfect.
Run perfect. You love to hear that, especially when I'm watching the engineers test stuff I'm going to have to strap myself to. Why do I sound so relaxed about such a high speed and such complex technology? It's not because I trust my own judgment, it's because I trust their judgment. They know what they're talking about. They are the best in the world at this technology, right here in Norway, putting it together with all the other world-class technologies. and then going out there and telling a story. And of course, it's a car. The other big challenge we've got is the wheels, rotating 10,000 times a minute, 170 rotations per second. The wheel rims are pulling 50,000 times the force of gravity outwards, which means you've got to use some kind of solid metal wheel, and it's right up at the limit of most materials. 14,000 hours of aerospace design work. This is way beyond any kind of Formula One technology. You know, this is right up at the top end of aerospace. 14,000 hours of design. The world's best forging house happens to be in Germany, Otto Fuchs. If you have a high-end sports car with really good alloys, they were made by Otto Fuchs. And then the wheels, again, spun-tested by Rolls-Royce up to 10,000 revolutions a minute to prove the model on the left by spinning the wheel on the right to validate it. And we've done all of that, and we've got those wheels ready to go. And we finished up with 3,500 bespoke components as the world's biggest kit car, plus about 30,000 rivets and various other assorted bits and pieces, 8 kilometers of wiring, and we're now at the final stages of putting it all together, getting it ready to run later on this year in the UK, slow speed, 300 kilometers an hour, and then we go to South Africa next year, aiming to start setting new supersonic records. But it's more than just a record. Let's go back to what I said earlier. This is about telling a story and getting kids excited about these sorts of numbers. And those, you know, a 13.5-meter long car that weighs 8 tons is difficult to conceive. As much, the equivalent power to 180 Formula One cars is even more difficult to get your head around. The bit I still struggle with, from a standing start, the car will be 20 kilometers away, stationary again, 2 minutes later, having done the middle kilometer in 2.2 seconds. Just startling numbers. And that's the story we're trying to tell to the audience right now. One of the traditional ways of doing that, and we have worked it very well, is to build a full-scale model of the car and put it in the sort of place that people will recognize, which worked really well. Press loved that. It was in the, huge articles in all of the newspapers. This is the new car. It's as long as 3 taxis, half the weight of a fully laden bus. Great. But being in the in all the sensible newspapers, our target audience is 10 years old. They don't read the newspapers every day. The little girl that we're trying to get excited about engineering and technology gets most of her news elsewhere, so we need to reach out to her news channels. You know, when she gets her worldview from YouTube, that's where we need to be.
Bloodhound SSC, engine start. Engine winds up, NH response, NL response. The most sophisticated land speed record car in history. Bloodhound supersonic car, with the engine now winding up, ready to go. Hydraulics are starting to come up. And the generator's online. Power systems are online.
all we need to try and achieve is to get the audience to understand some tiny piece of what's going on in front of them at that point and to understand it's remarkable and just ask that first key question, how does that work? That first step on the way to opening up the magical world of science and technology when you're 10. That is actually what we're trying to achieve. That's one of the ways we're doing it. How's it going so far? Don't know. Nobody has ever done this. We are the largest single-subject engineering outreach program in history. But before we've even started running the car, we have had something like 20 million visitors to our YouTube channel looking at short bits of science and technology video. It feels like we're doing okay so far. To keep that momentum going when we start running the car, we are going to stream live video and all of the live data channels from the car to a global audience. When you think about that, our engineers will be running the car and then doing the data analysis several hours later. You at home can do the data analysis while the car is still running. That has never been done before for any race car ever, or any kind of technology platform. It's that exciting. It's the largest multi-user engineering experiment in history. We're looking at tens of millions of people simultaneously engaging in this experiment. It is very ambitious. It's exactly what we're hoping to achieve. And the other problem we've got is, where do we run this? Because we're going to need a superb surface, 20 kilometers long with a good weather factor. We have been incredibly lucky. We searched the whole world and found the best track anywhere was in South Africa. The only downside is it had a lot of debris lying on an otherwise perfect surface. And here's the bit where the South Africans saw the opportunity 7 or 8 years ago. 300 people every dry season since then have been out clearing 22 million square meters. That's the same as a 6-lane road from here to London. That surface area cleared by hand. It's a world record in itself. They've picked up 55 tons of stones each, speck by speck from the surface over 7 years, and left us with the best straight-line racing surface in history. It in itself is an astonishing story. But I still come back to the point that just doing the record is not enough. So the other key piece of innovation is to look at this not as an engineering challenge for us. This, for us, is a storytelling challenge. This is a global communications challenge. So just as important as the desert is the network of high-speed data masts which were installed for us, that was specifically put in to support Bloodhound and 4 others like it, so that we can get those multi-channel and multi-channel video and data off a desert 9,000 kilometers from here. In fact, we're farther north, 10,000 kilometers from here, and get it out to the whole world pretty much as live. As I say, that has never been done before. We are incredibly excited about that. Right, here's the downside. When we start running next year at Hakskeen Pan in South Africa, I cannot tell you exactly what we're going to see, because we're going to speeds no one has ever been to before, in a car that no one has ever run before. We just don't know. We're going to see some remarkable things in terms of the aerodynamics, shock waves, the sonic booms, the data. We're going to learn a lot, but we don't know exactly what. That is the point. It is genuine an engineering experiment. All I can do is give you a little bit of an insight into 1 or 2 of the things we saw last time as an idea of that was interesting. This was the day that we set the world record last time. That is the first time a car ever went supersonic. And you can actually see the shockwave across the front of the car, moving the dust on the surface, picking the dust up, and it's glowing in the sunshine. That is a genuine photo taken from an ultralight, a microlight aircraft. Unique photo, never been taken before, will never be taken again, I suspect, because about 4 seconds later, the shockwave arrived at where the ultralight was, and ultralights don't go supersonic. He struggled not to crash thereafter, so we won't be trying that experiment again. But to give you an idea, just to finish off what that actually looks like moving, here is just a question for you. If a 10-year-old said, "How do you prove the world is round?" Do you reckon you could actually prove that the world is round to them without showing them a picture from space? How would you prove that the world is round? Because I'm about to show you a piece of video that proves the world is round. This car is running on a dry lakebed surface, flattened by the surface of the water, so it is a flat surface. Except, of course, it's not. It's a very smooth surface, but it is curved. because it's over 20 kilometers long and it follows the curvature of the Earth. And the car in this shot, already traveling at over 1,000 kilometers an hour, is actually about here. Hidden, you can see the dust trail behind it, but the car is hidden because it is hidden over the curvature of the Earth. You're about to watch a piece of video of a car driving up over the curvature of the Earth towards you, and it will appear over the curve. And for the first time in history, for the only time in history, it is traveling faster than its own sound. And if you think that looks impressive, just wait to see what we're going to start doing next year. But this is not just about setting another land speed record with a car that nobody will ever use again. It's about going to the limits of technology, exploring the science, and sharing it with the largest simultaneous experimental audience in history. Exciting and inspiring an audience of kids of all ages, but particularly that generation who are going to be the owners, the builders, and the creators of that high technology, low carbon, energy efficient world of the future, the place that we are all hoping to get to and that they are going to live in. That is what's going to, this is one of the things that's going to trigger their excitement. We are seeing that happen already. That is the story we are going to tell over the next few years as we run the car and beyond. It is about explaining the engineering, the technology, and how people relate to it, how our engineers have worked to develop the car and tell that story, what it's like to be in the car from my point of view. It's a story not just about the science and technology, it's also a story about the people who have done that. I've talked about the science and technology today, but when you think about it in the human context, it will be people telling that story. And to reflect on what Pellegrino said earlier, this is all about the interaction between the people and the technology, just like the land speed record is. Hopefully, that's dispelled a few of the myths about land speed records are completely pointless in the modern age, and it's also hugely dangerous and only crazy people would do that. If you still think that, then please do ask a question, we can talk more. But it gives you some sense of why we're doing this. It's not just about showcasing it's another racing car. This is about telling a global story to inspire a generation. And if I did that right, hopefully you're at least a little bit excited about the technology and what's going to happen next year. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Wow, what a start. Brilliant start, eh? My pulse was going up while I was watching those movies, was it? It was kind of, I was feeling, it was a mixture of excitement, fear, but mostly excitement, right?
I've seen them a couple of times and it still does that to me.
I love, you're a missionary, basically. You're on a mission, aren't you?
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it. You know, we hold, collectively, all of us in this room, hold an understanding and a connection with the science and technology, the building blocks of the future. You know, it's threaded through every part of today's world, and it's fundamental to building tomorrow's world. And we have an opportunity to tell that story in so many different ways. This is our attempt to tell that story in a really exciting, dynamic, can't put down kind of a way.
It's fantastic, really great. The questions are coming in. Who still hasn't managed to log on? I'm on as well now. It took me a while. Are we getting online? Do keep trying. Restart your iPhone. That helped with me. So I'm online now. It's all coming in. You can see the comments coming in here. I thought I'd give you a couple of questions that have come in. Andy, some really good questions. What types of brakes do they use?
Yeah, now there is a good question, because of course, when you're accelerating, I now look at it from a safety point of view, that's what I do as a pilot. When you're accelerating, more acceleration is always optional. You can always throttle back and slow down again. As soon as you come bursting out of the measured kilometre at 1,600 kilometres an hour, slowing down in the remaining 9 kilometres of the track has just become compulsory. You have to get that bit right every single time. So the braking is actually more important in terms of repeatability and reliability. So the sheer energy we're using, we can only absorb about 2% of the energy of the car in standard wheel brakes. So it has to be aerodynamic. And we are using a combination of both air brakes and parachutes. And here's the important bit. Unlike any other car, we'll say, well, I have an air brake, we'll have a parachute, and they need all of these things to work all the time. We have specifically, I have specified, because I'm in it, the air brakes have to stop the car by themselves without assistance. And if they fail, the parachute is a backup to the air brakes. And if that fails as well, because it's really not our day, we have a second parachute, which if the other two, it can stop the car by itself. So we've got 3 different ways of getting the car down to slow speed, 300 kilometers an hour, where the wheel brakes can do the rest of the work. But it's a really good question. Stopping is at least as important if you're going to do this safely.
I asked that. It was a great question because most people die on the way back from the top of Everest, right? It's the way
correct.
back down, actually.
Yeah.
That's the most dangerous part, the stopping part.
Thank you for that cheerful
There's a
thought.
lot of talk about autonomous drivers. Do you think any of the future land speed records will be done by autonomous cars?
No.
And then the question, will that be as exciting?
No. So how many people watch Formula One? Absolutely nobody's going to admit to it. No, I watch it. No, admit to it. It's okay. I know they're small, slow cars, just go around in circles, take life too seriously. Yeah, but yes. Okay, how many people would watch Formula One if they were all unmanned? Don't see many hands. Yeah, you get the point. I asked that question in an audience recently, and somebody said, yeah, I build autonomous vehicles. Yeah, well, okay, apart from you. The point is, first of all, the world governing body, the FIA, says you have to have an onboard driver controlling the car. That sort of makes sense to me. Those are the rules. Second of all, actually, it's very difficult to teach a computer to do something as well as a human being can do when you don't know what that task is. And that's why Formula One cars still, they have test drivers rather than test computers, because the test driver still gets more out of the car than the computer does. That there's still, it's difficult to teach people, the computers, when things are changing. That's what people are really good at. And the third and most important thing, remember, this is actually us talking about a relationship between people and technology. Watching the technology drive itself would kind of rob the message that we're trying to get over. So having the people around and one of them inside the car, I am a member of the test team, I'm a member of the engineering team, we are the story and we are the mechanism of that story. So it's a great question. Could you automate it? There's lots of technical reasons that it's difficult. Yes, you could. What would be the point? Why would you automate Formula One? People wouldn't watch. It's the same thing with us. This is actually a human achievement story and not just technology proving how good it is.
I'm just looking through, you've answered actually a lot of the questions that come in. One I'd like to ask you that came here is, are you scared?
Yes, but
Can I just share something? Because I asked you the question yesterday and you said no.
Well,
you said no to me.
In the context of, but I'll be slightly fairer. Am I scared of the car's going to crash and it's going to? No, we're actually doing this step by step. I genuinely believe what I said about we are using the world's best technology. We're going to do this step by step. And if we ever get to a stage where we are not sure what is going to happen, that's the day we stop. And if it's only 1,500 kilometers an hour, who's going to turn? If you said to me right now, you could set a record of 1,500. Yep, that'll achieve the aim. If it comes up to a piece of technology we can't quite get round, and a technical challenge, that is the story that we're telling. The engineering experiment to understand that technical limit that we didn't know before, that is the story we're actually telling. However, am I nervous about the whole process? Yes. Partly because we're working with world-class engineering firms and a world-class engineering team. When I get into the car, that's all on me. My driving has to be up to their standards. I have to do, for every single run, the test and the development to the same operational standards as they have done the engineering. So pressure is on me. That's fine. I'm a fighter pilot. That's what I've been trained for. Should I be nervous? Yes. The other part is explaining this. I'm nervous today that am I getting this story over? Bear in mind, most of you don't even speak English as a first language. And I apologize if I have rushed occasionally. I get excited about this, as you can probably tell.
We love that you get excited. We are excited. I was excited as that science teacher jumping up and down, yeah? And even the guys at Raufoss at Nammo, they were excited in a little Norwegian way. It was quite nice. But they were excited as well, right? So
yeah, that's Norwegian excitement. I know, I've seen it.
Here comes the most important question, I think. Does the car have a cup holder?
We have in our lighter moments, we have actually discussed the fact, so where is the stereo? Where do I put the iPod dock? which is entirely possible, and we may end up actually using some sort of iPad as a programmable. But anyway, are they going to let me play music in the car? Probably not, because I can't hear it. The jet engine, I've got the world's loudest military jet engine just behind my head, and at subsonic speeds, that will totally deafen me. When we're going supersonic, I can't hear the jet engine anymore. I'm traveling faster than the sound it's making. But the downside is the shock waves coming off the canopy now are even louder. So there's no chance of me hearing anything in the cockpit. The other thing was, shall we have a cup holder? Okay, have a think about the G that this car is pulling. It will accelerate at up to 2G. That is 60 kilometers an hour per second. The level of the fluid in the cup will be at 60 degrees to the horizontal. It will come spilling out of the back. Even if I manage to keep some in the cup, when we start slowing down, just closing the throttles, the aerodynamic drag at 1,600 kilometers an hour gives a 3G deceleration. 3G is 100 kilometers an hour per second. So have a think about this. For those of you driving today, do not try this on the way home. Have a think about driving it at 100 kilometers an hour and stopping completely in 1 second. That's an average of 3G. It is a very violent experience. All of the coffee would be all over the dashboard.
I can see you've thought of everything. So you started your presentation by saying this is a pointless exercise. It's not a pointless exercise. We get that. You also said this is about telling a story. I know you won't like this because you seem to be quite British as well and quite modest. But this is a brilliant story. The hero of the story is standing here, I believe. I know you've got a big team behind you. Yes, yes. A big round of applause for Andy Green, everybody. Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you.